Have you ever created something musically or artistically that you were once proud of, but then to look back on said thing years later and just wonder, what was I doing? I've been drawing fake Pokemon for years, and I've decided to go back and review all the ones that I drew many years ago, just because they're interesting. Welcome to DeadBedSpread's Fakémon Reviews, starring me, DeadBedSpread. In today's episode, we're going to be looking at some Fakémon inspired by nature and some inspired by nothing that would occur in the natural world. To those of you who have a fear of a certain type of bug, maybe this isn't the episode for you. The reason why comes in at number 46, Exiguil. A combination of the words exigua and ill. And gill, I guess. It's a pure bug type. So some of you may be wondering, what? Exiguil is based off the Cymathoa exigua, a real creature from our real world, also known as the tongue-eating louse. It wiggles its way in through a fish's gills and then attaches itself to its tongue, which it consumes and then replaces. And that's before I even made it into a Fakémon. However, nothing about this design really gives off that impression at all. It's just a little isopod. When the little isopod reaches level 24, it evolves into Exigusect, a combination of Exigua and Insect. Firstly, let's just ask why. It's got 6 snubs and 2 arms. That's 8 legs, insects only have 6. Anyway, it's gained the additional water typing because why would a creature that attacks fish not be water type to begin with? Who knows? For those of you who watched the first episode, this may resemble something. And for those of you who haven't, well, let me elaborate. This Fakémon takes inspiration from my original idea for my water starter. On a surface level, it looks pretty good, but then when you consider what it's actually based on, the whole line is just a vast well of missed potential. Like, nothing about this gives off that it's a tongue-eating louse, you know? Anyway. Coming in after these bugs is yet another bug in the form of Workabee, a combination of worker and bee. That's a pretty crap name if I'm being honest. It's just a small brown bee boy with no wings. If you've watched the whole series, though, this may look a bit familiar to you. When Workabee reaches level 24, wow, 2 in a row, it evolves into Boxabee, a combination of boxing and bee. It's gained the fighting type, for some reason, and looks more competent than its pre-evolution. As for what these are based on, I could not tell you. I could, however, tell you why you might recognize them. Back in episode 2, I said, interesting to note though, and I'll get to it when I get around to the other guys, is that in the original decks, Caterpie and Venonat kind of share this theory, whereas Caterpie's final evolution looks like the evolution to Venonat, and then Venonat's evolution, Venomoth, looks like the final evolution to Caterpie. So it's kind of like, with this cocoon that looks nothing like Moi, I tied it together with the Pokemon in my decks that would share the number with Venonat in the original decks. Kinda cool, kinda stupid, you know what, it's fine. Well, this is the line that fits in where Venonat would be B! Translus, therefore looks like it should be in this line, but it isn't. You know, you get it. The line is fine, but I think with just a tiny push, it could be something great. You wanna know what isn't great? Armey. A combination of arm and eye. This abomination is pure fighting type. What is it? Well, wasn't that obvious? It's an arm with an eye, like it, and it has weird horns for some reason. Or are they tiny hands? I mean, from some angles, it kind of looks like a weird chicken, you know? This is one of those Fakémon that was obviously designed to be as stupid as possible. It was also apparently one of the last ones I ever designed. Even back then, I wasn't on board with it. As a concept, it doesn't take inspiration from anything. In fact, the only thing that it does remind me of is this.
Well, how would you feel if Nomi Malone was a Pokemon?
Who's Nomi Malone?
And she hops around on her one foot.
What the fuck are you talking about?
Which means that you can imagine my horror when you see this.
No! What do I do?
What is this? At level 32, Armey becomes Arm's Eyes. I cannot imagine where that name comes from. This is the Diglett Dugtrio of my fake decks, so I just designed something simple in order to slap it together 3 times. I guess the horn hand things are kinda cool, how the whole thing is non-symmetrical, but it also creates a perfect circle in the middle. How creative, how original. You know what, I take it back, this is the best boy, 10 out of 10. Our last Fakémon line on today's list comes in the form of Emeow, a dual-type fighting flying Fakémon. Its name is derived from the words emu and ow, you know, because it punches people. This was an unused type to me when I created it because I wasn't aware that Hawlucha existed. In terms of a concept, I think it's great, but the execution is lacking in some way. At level 32, wow, 2 in a row again, Emeow evolves into Boxstrich, Its name is a combination of the words boxing and ostrich. Wow, two Fakémon so close together that use boxing in their name. Well, clearly we know which one is better. I'm a big fan of this one's neck, oddly enough, but my real question to my past self is, why would a flightless bird be using its wings to punch? That's like kicking a football but using your face. I think we all know where the redesign is going. However, that'll have to wait until we go through all the other guys first. If you recall, I said that the whole Exigual line was missed potential. Well, get ready for that potential to hit a home run. Exigual now exclusively exists within the mouths of already existing fish Pokemon. How hard was that? Imagine it. You're out fishing on a route, looking for a new Pokemon. Magikarp are your most common encounter, as per usual. Suddenly, you encounter a Magikarp, but something is a bit off about it. This Magikarp is ill. There's a tiny bug creature inside its mouth. You've encountered Exigual, the parasite Pokemon. Exigual is now a water bug as opposed to a pure bug, and indeed, has taken control of the Magikarp. Exigual isn't even exclusively found in Magikarp either. You can find it in Feebas and in all other sorts of fish Pokemon. If you think this is sick, just wait until you see what it turns into. Upon reaching level 30, Exigual no longer becomes Exigusect, but instead becomes the mighty Cymathyron, a mix of Cymathoa Exigua and Tyrant. Honestly, this is something I'm super proud of. After draining as much of the host's nutrients as it can bear, Exigual evolves, turning into the mighty Cymathyron. This Pokemon develops traits from the Pokemon that it had been feeding off of, and evolves accordingly. The unfortunate part is that Magikarp, once the host to this terrible parasite, has now become a mindless bottom feeder itself. What, you didn't notice the Magikarp back there? The most obvious trait of this thing is how it resembles Gyarados. But what if it evolved from a Feebas? Boom! Milotic form Cymathyron. I'm planning on making several more of these, so follow my DeviantArt if you want to see them. Also, their shinies are derived from the Pokemon that they infect. Compared to everything else that I've updated, Workabee was altered the least, but almost comes off as a completely different Pokemon. Now known as Baublebee, a combination of Bauble, Ball, and Bumblebee, it sports a brighter colour palette and is now completely spherical. Lacking wings, Baublebee use their incredibly bouncy bodies to launch themselves onto their opponents. In a swarm, if one starts bouncing, they all start bouncing. Also, yeah, it looks like an Elekid and an Electrode had a baby. This was also the first proper redesign I did. As before, when it reaches level 24, it evolves into Boxabee, which has been redesigned a bit, literally. No longer bouncy, Boxabee use their incredibly angular bodies to obliterate rocks, focusing their punches onto their edges. Because they find trees too easy to break, Boxabee colonies are found in mountain ranges rather than in forests. Once a pretty bland line, now the thematic through line of shapes has turned them into something much cooler. Also, their shinies use their original colour palette. How ugly is that? Okay, Armey. What does one even do with something as abstract as this? Right, so Armey. Army. As in arms, as in firearms. Okay, yes, I like where this is going. So, Armey's redesign will be a gun. This is probably as close to the original that I could stick to whilst also improving it. Its tail can still clamp like a hand, so it is still a hand on one end with an eye on the other. Would it be pure fighting type now, or fighting steel, or a different type completely? You decide. Arms, eyes. I guess if we were to come up with a new name for this thing, it would incorporate the word armory somehow. Designing this was really a challenge, but I managed to keep the 3 eyes and 3 arms, which act as a tripod. It's a mobile 3-way turret. Talk about overkill. Yeah, sure, it's unrecognizable, but is that really a bad thing? Finally, to top everything off, we come to the redesign of Emau. As a flightless bird, it has no wings at all, and its feet are now boxing gloves, which it can use to bounce up to incredible heights. It can also deliver harsh pecks for extra damage. I don't know what inspired me to change the colour scheme from brown to grey, but I do think it looks much better. Boxstritch keeps his new design philosophy of doing away with the wings, but keeps the cool looking neck. I don't know why I ever gave it a striped neck, but I think it looks rad. These two are amongst the most popular of my reimaginings so far. The shinies for these two take inspiration from Rock'em Sock'em Robots, with the red versus blue. I wonder if they'd have live boxing matches between these two, but then that's just a Pokemon battle, isn't it? Yeah. Alright guys, thanks for tuning in to episode 5 of DBSR. I like how this series is going, it's nice to be back into it. I know earlier on in the series I said that the bunnies were the worst things I ever designed, but then I come across things like Armey and I'm like, wow. You have really stooped to a new low, you know that? The next episode has 2 Pokemon, one is pretty disgusting and one might be downright offensive. If you want to see any of these guys or see new ones I'm doing, you can go to my DeviantArt. It's the same name as my YouTube channel, DeadBedSpread.